Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Julie Cirelli. I am co-director of Park Books in Switzerland, and together with the Sharjah Architectural Triennial, we are so pleased to welcome you to the launch event for Field Notes on Scarcity, the book that I had the honor and pleasure of co-editing along with our curator, Tosin Oshinowo. Today's panel features 5 insightful contributors from the book: Yara Sharif, Nasser Golzari, Ester Carro, Adeyemo Shokunbi, and Raafat Majzoub. Raafat couldn't be with us today, so he has pre-recorded his remarks. Together, we will delve into the pivotal subject of our book, which is the influence of scarcity on design practice. Scarcity has traditionally been perceived as a barrier, something to overcome. Is this better? Scarcity has been perceived as a barrier to overcome, an insurmountable challenge, a hurdle. Yet the varied perspectives and fragmented experiences from the global South coalesce within our pages, presenting scarcity not just as a limitation, but as a catalyst for innovation, ingenuity, and a rediscovery of local wisdom. Through 65 diverse contributions that include practical solutions and proposals, project presentations, theoretical essays, poetry, and visual art, this book surfaces powerful themes: scarcity as a driver of creativity, an inspiration for ingenuity, and a reverence for our limited natural resources. These narratives are rooted in their specific contexts and their specific locales, but they extend their relevance to global challenges such as health crises, conflict, migration, and the reimagining of post-colonial land use and architecture. The book advocates for a departure from the dependence on permanence and abundance, urging for sustainable, adaptable, and resilient design practices. Spanning cities from Sao Paulo to Tripoli, Gaza to Lagos, our speakers today bring forward their unique stances on valuing and sharing resources under various constraints: limited materials, infrastructure, public space, limited funding, undervalued labor, even the terrorizing conditions of war and extreme conflict. We'll begin with Yara Sharif and Nasser Golzari. They're practicing architects, academics, and co-founders of the Palestine Regeneration Team. Operating at the intersection of design and socio-political activism, they use architecture as an instrument to reconsider contested territories. Today, they will share their vision for Gaza and their tactics of resistance to reclaim Palestinian urban rights, a journey through despair, hope, and concrete strategies for rebuilding and recovery. Next, we'll have a recording from Raafat Majzoub, an architect, artist, and writer from Tripoli, Lebanon. As director of the Khan and editor-in-chief of the Dangala Architecture series, his work defies simple categorization. His video piece for the book, Everything in Your Love Becomes Easy, explores the immeasurable labor of love that buoys Lebanon's strained resource management. His projects, often meta works within works, challenge and reconfigure the existing cultural infrastructures. Today, he will guide us through the Street School Prototype, an initiative that reshapes public space into a dynamic learning environment. Following Raafat is Ester Carro, an architect and social urbanist passionately leading Fazendeando, an organization dedicated to the cultural, territorial, and social upliftment of favela communities in Sao Paulo. Ester's work is a testament to the transformative power of education and community-led social initiatives, providing women with practical skills in construction and empowering them to reshape their futures. Lastly, Adeyemo Shokunbi, an architect whose practice is firmly rooted in Nigeria. Returning to Lagos after years in the United Kingdom, Adeyemo has been forging a distinct Nigerian architectural vernacular, celebrating local materials and crafts in innovative ways. His approach exemplifies how traditional techniques can evolve into modern practices, shaping an architecture that is both distinctly Nigerian and universally resonant. Following the presentations, we'll open the floor to questions and further exploration of the ideas presented today. For those of you who are intrigued, the book was handed out and those who received a notebook, and there's also a reading room with this publication and many others. Yara, Nasser.
All right. Thank you, Julie, for the introduction, and thank you, everybody, for being here. And most importantly, also thank you for the founder, organizers, and the curator of the second edition of Sharjah Triannual for giving us the platform to be here today and also to make our voice heard. Our presentation will be about a project that we are doing in Gaza, but I think it's also a project that is very close to our heart, being from Gaza ourselves and leaving family or what's left from them in there. So thank you for being here, and we appreciate this opportunity to speak out about this.
And I'd like to thank you, thank the organizers. It's very important that this platform has been given to us, especially that it is time when so many people so many institutions are staying in silence, and we think this is quite an important time for us to stand up and make the invisible visible. So we hope that this lecture can say a few words about what is happening in Gaza, but also what we're trying to do, hopefully in collaboration with others.
As Julie kindly mentioned, both Nasser and I are practicing architects and academics and researchers, and the way we see, lift this up. Is that better? Okay. The way we see our work is really that combination or link between the practice, the design, and the research, where they all feed into one another. We are generally interested in what we call uncertain landscape, in social and environmental ecology, but also in decolonizing the landscape to draw attention to what we call invisible communities or the invisible other, whose voice is left unheard. We try to engage with the politics of the place and question the role of urban practice with strategies that combat colonialism.
We also, very much in our work, we try to encourage subversive tactics. We get engaged not only with the politics, but also with identity and cultural issues, as well as very much the desperate economic issues. In our work, we try to offer an alternative to the ideological destruction of the space. In fact, we try to draw on the debates on the right to the city and to reconstruct conditions in which we can reclaim the right to the city, how appropriate it is now, especially in Gaza and in whole of Palestine. Right to access, which meaning a production, and the right to reimagining beyond the boundaries, beyond the borders. We really encourage all the time, not only in our own work, but also in the work we do with the students, with our clients, with our community, to speculate, to take the challenge of being able to dream beyond the constraints, which is quite important, to imagine the unimaginable. So the power of the invisible, which is our lecture and the exhibition. In this exhibition, we try to reconstruct the reality of our faceless, what has been created, an absurd landscape in Gaza.
We bring to the surface the world of the invisible with their resilient practices. Gaza, as we speak, is a city that has been turned into an absurd landscape for the 9th time running. In such an absurd landscape, in that context of Gaza, the whole city fabric has become exposed, and the relationship between the internal and the external is blurred. People no longer dwell the city in a conventional sense. That relationship between the street, the block, the room, and the living room has changed with a new perspective to everyday life. And therefore, in such a context, we can no longer really treat that notion of home in a conventional construct. There is a need for us for a new approach, an urgency to rethink new ways of domesticity, to rethink home, but more importantly also to rethink the role of the street and the architect.
In understanding this unconventional, absurd, and blurred reality of the context, we put a foot on the earth and a hand in the sky. Hand in the sky to allow us to speculate, to dream. But foot on earth is to do with practical, with skills, with people that we have to work with. We try to have a new reading on this, of the city, the landscape that is needed to be reconstructed and conceptualized to in terms of domesticity and understanding of the city itself. So in this landscape lies a hidden world, which we have experienced working with the families in Gaza in 2010 when we traveled and met so many people, a world which is built out of urgency, scarcity, and resilience that challenges the power by reappropriating its discards. In this absurd landscape, we call for a new approach and a new aesthetic that challenges the colonial power and the colonial aesthetics that's been imposed on us. So the gallery over there, which we have converted the gallery into what we call an experimental lab to narrate Gaza and its creative initiatives. The components that are assembled in this lab are built on the ongoing works that we've been doing in different projects across the last 13, 14 years, including the work that we've done both in West Bank and Gaza, and with Palestine Regeneration Team. There are accumulation of what has been collected, used, appropriated in collaboration with the families to reconstruct fragments of their neighborhoods and homes.
In what we call experimental lab, we document a long journey of learning and working with the residents to rethink their home, as Nasser has mentioned. We bring in some self-built techniques that we have done with the local community, which were very much developed from the available resources there out of urgency and out of necessity. To put things in context, Gaza is not allowed to get cement into its border. And therefore, having to work with whatever is available there become a challenge, but also an opportunity.
Yes, this opportunity and the challenge led to this initiative that we have been testing. It has been accumulating in terms of our knowledge, but also the materials that we can use. But also it addresses something which is to do with mobility. While we were in Gaza, we knew where we were, we could not reach all the families, and definitely the families could not reach us, as it is the case now. So we developed this new mobile typology, which is called the Green Lab.
And the idea of this lab was really to create or accumulate or reappropriate what we have to offer a new skin for Gaza from the ruins, bearing in mind that we have rubble and we have available discards, so what can we do? All was really also in the aim for us to cultivate hope and also offer alternative to empower and stitch not only Gaza, but also to think of the community in Palestine as a whole. The distance between Gaza and the West Bank is really 25 minutes. Yet the people of Gaza cannot reach Palestine, cannot reach the West Bank and vice versa. So the idea of this work or this mobile lab is also to accumulate resources and allow that power of stitching to be realized to counter that colonial politics of fragmentation that has been enforced on us. The objects and artifacts on display that you will see in the exhibition suggest a new skin for Gaza. This new skin indicate an alternative use of material.
So these the materials are also emerging and were generated by the informal initiatives by the community when we met, the communities in Gaza and also in West Bank. They include working with rammed earth, reclaiming rubble, reuse of reconstruction bars, clay, fired clay, unfired clay, metal, recycled timber, cardboard, what we could get. And when you see at the exhibition, these are just examples, fragments of what we had done and how we think this alternative way of using existing materials and practices in context can create new architecture and new skin.
And while these objects on their own may not make sense, the idea is that in their collection, they construct a fragment of what we call the other reality, a world of impermanence and possibility. They offer us an alternative expression in architecture. They form a new skin for Gaza, a new way for maybe reconstructing what is now becoming a ruin.
So they, in many ways, we and the skin that is suggesting a new aesthetic. It is the one that we are not necessarily familiar with, but they do stress on Gaza's right to city and home.
As we speak, Gaza continues to be obliterated. 13 years from our initial initiative, now over 70% of Gaza is destroyed with no right to basic resources. We would like to take this opportunity, we would like to take this platform to reiterate that Gaza will not be erased. We will continue to self-build for Gaza. Gaza is calling for its basic right, a right for freedom, a right for a place to call home. We call you, as architects, as professionals, to contribute towards healing the fragmented landscape and join forces where the beauty of impermanence is also a form of power and a form of resilience, where ruins tell stories, where the artifacts of destruction mark moments of home and memories.
So we're calling, we have already set up an initiative, a group called Architects for Gaza. We like to bring architects, environmentalists, and urban planners in aim to work with families and to rebuild Gaza in two ways, not only physically working with the families where they are and where they have been displaced, but also to set up educational bases. Many of those students have had their universities and the school bombed and carpet bombed and destroyed, and they are without any places. And we think, just listening this morning to a discussion between Leslie and Toussaint, what was quite important was the fact that it has to be also at the classrooms as well as on the tents, between the families, on the destroyed streets. And I think that's what we're planning to do. And we call, again, on all of those who are interested, even if they're not really touched by the humanitarian aspect of what's happening, but also about the climate. Think about the climate. What is happening in Gaza? Over 1,000 million tons of carbon has been emitted in the last 4 weeks, which is 3 times more than what London produces in whole year, which is 1.5 times of Hiroshima town when the bomb was dropped at Hiroshima. So that is the catastrophe, the extent of the catastrophe, ecological, social, environmental, on Gaza.
So with that in mind, I would like to just a quote from Arundhati Roy, who generally refers to, excuse me, she generally refers to the empire, but I would like to use her quote to refer to colonialism. She says, our strategy should not only be to confront colonialism, but to lay siege to it, to deprive it of oxygen, to shame it, to mock it, with our art, our music, our literature, our stubbornness, our joy, our brilliance, our sheer relentlessness, and our ability to tell our own story. Today we tell our own story, and we hope you can join us, and we hope Gaza can be remembered. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yara and Nasser. Our next presenter is Raafat Majzoub, who has pre-recorded his presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this conversation. Everything in Your Love Becomes Easy is the title of a video work I produced in 2019 to document the process of building the first street school prototype in my hometown, Tripoli, north of Lebanon. The phrase itself comes from a voice note that the carpenter I was collaborating with sent me to explain that even if the budget of the project was too little for what he was doing, كل شيء بحبك بيهون. When I was approached to participate in the field note publication, this moment came to mind, and in the book, you'll find a QR code that takes you to that video. I hope you'll be curious enough to watch it. As you'll see, it's a messy, endearing, hilarious video that is sometimes sad, a mix of emotions that make up the place I call home. In this conversation, it is important for me to acknowledge where I come from. I have been trained as an architect and as an artist in Western institutions because my parents wanted to give me the best education available. And before that, I was getting my schooling in American schools, with English being the main language of instruction. In Lebanon, as it is common in many places in the global south, we are trained not to dream in our mother tongues and that the worlds within them are scarce. I'm grateful that I'm from the city that defies this illusion of scarcity. And even in the most catastrophic scenarios, remains a space to perpetuate cultural practices and acknowledges the world beyond national identity. In a way, Tripoli has never integrated within the narrative of the most recent borders of Lebanon, and remains a space of exchange and solidarity with our neighbors that are also each other, or maybe ourselves. Tripoli's politics is Arabist, and all the complexities this may bring. This ongoing connection could be that Tripoli is a maker city, where historic industries and trade routes have connected it to other cities that are now in other countries that are still vibrant. What I want you to keep with you from this is that the work that I'm going to show you is an attempt to engage the pedigreed and the non-pedigreed forms of knowledge as complementary stakeholders in a process of mutual learning. These projects bring in a lot of appreciation, love, compassion, and bridge the gaps created by scarcity in our modes of exchange. After working in the art and culture sectors for quite some time, I came to the realization that the institutions spearheading radical imagination, driving culture forward, seem to replicate the scarcity in the systems we're trying to change and develop. I became mostly curious about the possibility of building something that would facilitate a more abundant imagining of what the future Arab society should do or could look like in order for us not to fall into this modern trap of scarcity. I founded the Khan in 2016 as a lab to prototype cultural practices and to create a space to afford to test, make mistakes, test again, and discuss. And now that you've heard an intro to my love story with Tripoli, I can share a little ulterior motive. I was sick of the government, NGOs, and INGOs repeating that broken record of it not having enough resources to have substantial growth. Street School is one of the main projects, of the many projects we've developed at the Khan that aim to reveal indigenous cultural practices or local know-how and connect them through small knowledge exchange prototypes. The starting capital of the 3 street schools I will show you today has been artist fees I received from different art institutions in 3 cities. The QR code here also takes you to the Everything in Your Love Becomes Easy video. The first prototype was made in Tripoli. It was 2019, and I received the commission to make a big sculptural piece for a small production and artist fee. I think the first moment I started thinking of street school seriously was when I realized that I don't want to spend all the money on beautiful materials and pay labor just peanuts. So it hit me. Maybe it was more important for me to acknowledge the broken system that relies on sacrifice of labor, me included, and turn that into the project itself. I gathered a team of industrialists and makers I usually work with in Tripoli and invited them to play a game with me. I would add the artist fee and the production fee as one lump sum and then divide it equally between us. This meant that we had no money for materials and that we had to scavenge, steal, collect, trash, essentially, anything except buying materials. That would be taken out of our total capital and consequently decrease everyone's pay. I'm not really sure why they said yes, but I'm happy they did. In a way, credit also goes to Tripoli's interpersonal mess. I knew they were curious, and in a way, their fees would be higher than the rates for the 10-day process that I was proposing. Accidentally, this project started becoming much more than what it was supposed to be. We started mapping dumping districts, and because there was no initial design, it became an exploration of public taste, public aesthetics. What does each of us think is nice, and how would we go about building something that we all think is worth it? Also, since this is a school, what are we teaching? Why is this a school? The workflow, task distribution, and skill share was all new. And in a way, the team started realizing that what we were doing was the school itself, and competing with that system, challenging it. Abu Khadr, the carpenter I was telling you about, felt that he was putting in more work than the others and wanted the equal pay to be revisited. The aftermath of this conversation is where the title of this intervention comes from. We shifted the workflow to cater to Abu Khadr's demands, but everyone kept their equal share of the money. These are a few more shots from the video, more garbage that becomes not garbage, and then a few moments of the installation process. And here, some adrenaline, and finally, our little masterpiece. I sat with this process for quite some time, thinking that somehow, accidentally, we built a one-to-one scale of a project proposal. I'm sure this is shared by almost everyone hearing this today, but the amount of proposals I've written far surpasses the amount of ideas I was able to realize. So again, it hit me. It will not only be one street school, but several. And the lessons will build up as we go. The second prototype I want to share today is in Amman, where I was invited by an art institution to create a second prototype on their premises. This time I came ready. We don't pay for material, we pay for skills, we pay for people. This part was clear. The fun part here was that we decided to use leftovers from artworks that have been exhibited in the institution before to build the school. It was on the street, so passersby joined, the staff joined, and within a week, we were ready to go. It's very satisfying to see that people that haven't considered themselves teachers to be put in that position. Slowly, authorship disappears and pride comes in. I feel it generates something from nothing. Here's another view of the school and a view from the street. And the last school that I'd like to talk about is the Abu Dhabi prototype. Again, this comes as an art commission, but this time it was a bit different. The revolution was starting in Lebanon, and people started using the streets in ways we haven't before. They started using the streets to create wealth from nothing. Social spaces that were lacking started being populated on the street. People started harvesting trees on the sidewalks to pick olives and oranges in different cities based on what was planted and using it as food. Classrooms moved to the street. Everything moved to the street, and I wanted to acknowledge that shift. This time, I was more focused, more focused than with the Amman one, because I didn't only want to invest in skill. I wanted to invest in skills that could show this sharing between one city and another, which is something that really triply instills in me, that we are not stuck in this geographical boundary. And so I wanted Tripoli to share something with the host city, which was Abu Dhabi. So the slide that you see here, the left is Tripoli, making of a chair, and then the right is in Abu Dhabi. And the question here became, what if the material we use this time isn't trash or leftovers, but materials that were also abundant and part of the earth itself? The team at the institution inviting me to work on this project also invited a group of women that work with palm leaf or fus leaf weaving. And together we made this project happen. What I did was I sent basic geometries that respond to the takeover of the streets in Lebanon. And the women in Abu Dhabi needed to invent new ways of working together to execute them. And in a way, this was the first prototype that I was doing remotely for this project, far away, kind of like I am right now. And while it was exciting that the making was no longer centered around me giving instructions and trying to organize, I felt a bit anxious. So I wrote a little dua that I included as an audio component of this work for the first time. I'm leaving you with it and with an inspiring awe and gratitude for the possibilities of working together against what is considered possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raafat. Our next speaker is Ester Carro.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I am so happy to be here for speaking about the Brazilian community, Brazilian favelas. And thanks so much, Tozin. Thanks so much, the team, Sharjah Architecture Trienal. Sorry, because my English could be better. So today I will have help. But I would like the introduction in English because for me to also important communicate in English. I don't have English in my school. I born in precarious situation. In the community without the green areas, in the community without the school, in the community without this public space, in the community without the basic infrastructure. But I try and change my community. I choose study architecture because I wanted to change my community. I would speak about it today, but my focus, my objective today is speak for you the reality, the different favelas, and speak for you this important our profession for change the favelas. Okay, now I will speak in Portuguese, okay? Sorry. Eu vou começar mostrando para vocês algumas imagens da favela onde eu nasci. E é uma realidade muito precária, porque as pessoas não têm acesso ao saneamento básico, as pessoas não têm acesso à moradia digna. Às vezes, eu fico muito mal de ter que ver algumas situações, porque eu vejo, às vezes, pessoas morrendo, eu vejo, às vezes, pessoas doentes, porque elas não têm uma moradia digna, porque elas não têm acesso a uma área verde, à dignidade. E as crianças não têm, muitas das vezes não têm onde brincar, então elas precisam brincar à margem do córrego. Tem muita insalubridade, muito mofo nas casas. Muitas casas também estão em cima do córrego, e o que prejudica, acabam entrando muitos ratos, baratas. E welcome to Jardim Colombo. There are different problems, but there are solution. Now I will speak about the solution. I am president in Fazendinhando, and we work the different projects, community engagement, participatory process, shared governance, sustainability, promotion of the local economy. And the first work, the Fazendinha, the world trash. One day I received the video, the Francis Carro. And the Francis Carro is my inspiration. And talk me, Ester, you showed the work in other space, but to choose working in your community. And it's very, very precious. This space not sacred, but we started the change. Was difficult process, and I am, and I never imagined when I finished my university, I would be taking tires in the street. I never imagined it because in the university, nothing speak about it. But it was necessary because no having money for continue the intervention. Aqui nós temos a fazendinha e está dividida em algumas plataformas para conter. Nós utilizamos os pneus para conter o espaço, mas também para as pessoas sentarem. E we work with the process participatory because my opinion about this space no can the unique opinion. The community need dream. The community need to speak what dream for the space. It is important the process participatory. And my community not had the public space, but now it's possible. And we work with physical transformation, but we work culture transformation. The other project about fazendeiras, for me, it's very, very important project and a special project because the many women not had study, not have finished school, and not had the working, and now she has new opportunity for working construction civil, and she women change your reform, your community. For it is very, very important, the training in the community, the engagement community, because when the technique arrive in the community, the women, the people, the children understand how do you do. Because the many people not have access the techniques, the university. So it's very important the arrive the techniques, the education there. And we have a different capitation training. For example, this training, the women recycling the different materials and the use in your house. This project connect with a new job. The women not have work, so now the women have job, have opportunity. And she believe in your capacity. And for finish, I will speak about Fazendo Lar. This project we reformed the precarious house. Today, I will show the case Chiquinho house, the house for meters. Imagine you, one person, they live in 4 meters. For me, I didn't sleep well when I visited the house Tiquinho, because the situation is very precarious. No bread, no refrigerator, no bed, no clothes, no sink, no dignity. But with my techniques, thank you. With my techniques and the help of the different people, we get the change, the reality, the Chiquinho. And now have the opportunity, dignity, and we get expand the house, and the house have 7 meters. And it's very important to speak the Tiquinho participate the wall process in the house. Tiquinho no wait to finish the house. Tiquinho participated the wall process. And for continuous the reforms, we receive the students also to work in the house, and the recycling materials. Yeah, and it is necessary to empower the community to be agents of transformation, to fight for their dreams, and now that they are the solution. I want to speak forward the importance about our transformation. I have different difficult, and sometimes I would like no work with it because it's very difficult. It's very difficult to see the problems, but it's necessary. And for a long time, my community were forgetting, and now no more. And I want for you working in favelas, helping in favelas in the world, because the situation is very, very, very precarious. Thanks so much.
That was beautiful, Esther. Thank you so much. Our last speaker before we begin our Q&A session is Adeyemo Shokunbi. Welcome.
Testing. Good afternoon to everyone. I've always wanted to say this, actually. It's something that we do a lot of the time in Nigeria when you're doing a public speaking activity, which is to say, I stand on existing protocol. So basically that just is to thank everyone, especially the SAT team, for bringing me out to speak about what it is that, we're trying to achieve or we're trying to do out in Lagos, Nigeria. It's been an interesting journey so far, and I was saying earlier to Tosin's parents about how I am so indebted to to her, because the journey of me standing in front of you today started from a day that she chose to visit one of our projects, and she said something that basically started this whole thing, and that was that, Ade, you first of all need to take very good pictures of your finished or completed projects. Because before, I would just go on, use my phone, take pictures, and that was all that I used to do. So this wonderful, beautiful picture that you can see here is actually down to the fact that she chose to inform me that this is the way to go. So not that it's a topic, but my story today is actually based on 2 projects that we've been able to do so far that has really changed the essence of why I'm an architect. Sorry. And this is something that I guess I can't really say much on, because like my friends who are in the audience know, I'm not one that speaks that much about my work. But obviously, having been given a platform to do so today, I'm going to try my possible best. But I'll let the images actually tell their own stories. So, actually, let me take you back to when this actually started in my mind. There's this whole thing about how we try to, collaborate with like-minded people in Lagos. And a very good friend of mine, Majzoub, had asked me to help her create her studio and residence. And at that time, having been someone that worked or trained and worked in the UK for a very long time, going back to Nigeria, I was still carrying the baggage of what I had learned or what had been instilled in the School of Architecture that I attended. So for that project to sort of like start to change my way of thinking to where I have ended up today, I would commend or actually show appreciation to Majzoub as well. Can we get on to the next slide, please? Oh, sorry, I'm supposed to do that. Is it possible for me to hold one of these mics? I always like to sort of like act as if I'm on a stage presenting or singing. Hello? Okay, yeah, good. No, because I like to walk around because I think better whilst I'm moving around, and it's also to distract people from whatever it is that I'm presenting. But, the thing is, the question that I asked myself after I was asked to partake in this was, what is the influence of scarcity, as an architect? What are the things that basically jump up at you? And, there are a list of all these things that, come to mind, and they're the things that have actually influenced how we move forward with the projects that we're working on. And it's like the design constraints, scarcity compels architects to innovate and creatively adapt in using limited resources, exploring alternatives in materials, construction methods, and space usage to optimize functionality and aesthetics. With regards to the aesthetic, I think for a very long time, we look across the landscape of Lagos, and it was difficult to actually pinpoint to something that was ours. We had this landscape that was very foreign, things that were all jumbled up, ideas jumbled up that didn't necessarily tell our story. So I felt that it was time to start to look inwards or inwardly in order to be able to, at least start to address some of these things that I felt were necessary. And, we have what everyone is obviously mindful of these days, and that's sustainability. This, as it states here, that it drives scarcity drives sustainable design, encouraging architects to use resources efficiently, minimize waste, and I mean, we all know what these things are. I mean, I'm hoping that a lot of people here are architects. So, you know, we talk about the economic considerations, we talk about the local context, and we talk about the social impact. But for me, in addition to all those things that were listed, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have is this idea of the scarcity of ideas, you know, in Nigerian architecture. And it doesn't stem from a shortage of materials or resources, but rather from various factors, such as limited exposure to innovative contextual architectural concepts, conservative design practices, and a lack of emphasis on pushing creative boundaries. And I think, as most of my friends here would actually note, the ones that are from Nigeria, that we have so much that can be done, you know, as in we don't have limitations as such in what we can create. Yes, the resources might sort of like slow us down a little bit, but that doesn't really stop us from doing so many things. So, I mean, one of the other things that actually started this journey was my visit to this building in a town, or a little village, I should say, in somewhere outside of Abeokuta, which is a southwestern city. And the way this young lady, or this young girl, I should say, was looking at me whilst I took that photograph, sort of left an indelible mark. Because I didn't actually go inside of this space, but I was just very curious about how it felt for her to exist in this space. You know, she probably was born in there, I don't know. But, you know, nurturing a culture of architectural exploration, encouraging interdisciplinary collaborations, which, you know, I'll speak on a little bit later, embracing new ideas and pushing beyond conventional norms and promoting diverse perspectives. This young boy here was also another person that, you know, subconsciously, because I went back to this photograph much later after it was taken, because I visited this village for another reason. We were hunting for land next to a golf course. But this young boy also kind of like led me to sort of like go on this mission, which is to spearhead a movement of alternative indigenous aesthetics, creating a sense of impermanence within built environments, extending the vitality of buildings through their materiality, using locally sourced materials in new ways. And what does this all mean? You know, one of the things that I have chosen not to do ever again, if I have the opportunity not to, is to paint my buildings in Lagos. We live in an environment where the weather conditions are very, very harsh. And as soon as you're done with a building, I'm actually quite, I was thinking of actually putting a picture of a building that I had done, and it was looking amazing once it was completed, but like about a year or so later, it just started to look quite sad. I was thinking of actually just showing that contrast, but I thought, nah, maybe not this time. But anyway, point is, I've chosen to say that, you know what, the best way forward is to try and find ways of at least keeping our buildings in a state where it just lives, you know? And this project here is a project that we did in the University of Lagos. And it was the start of this journey in a way, because, you know, I had an opportunity to just do whatever I wanted. So, you know, I thought, okay, what do I do now? And if I have all these thoughts in my mind about, you know, not wanting to use or not wanting to paint my buildings, what can I do to actually coat them in a new way that would give it permanence or impermanence? I don't know. So I had to do a search for people that were used to doing this. It was very difficult, couldn't find one until I found this gentleman here. And, you know, we were experimenting and playing around, and I felt this is fine, but it wasn't sustainable, because having just one person do this for a whole building wasn't really going to work. So one of my role models, someone that actually made me align my thoughts about what it is that I'm doing, Demas Nwoko, he states this as something that we have to imbibe in us, which is tinkering and thinking are the hallmarks of great architecture. And I think I've been very, very lucky because one of the few, Nigeria gives you the opportunity to actually not just design or create architecture, but to execute it as well. And I feel that what has helped me is the opportunity that I've had this long in creating my architecture, making my architecture. And it's given me a platform to just experiment and do different things. Obviously, I'm sure everybody knows what this is, but if you don't, this is laterite. It's an abundant material that we find across the world, but it's in abundance in Nigeria. It's abundant in Nigeria. I'm trying to show these images because they build up into a bigger story. So going back to the guy that was doing the render with the material and finding that not to be sustainable, I mean, my friends all know that I am someone that I play around with this texture because one of the reasons why I actually used to texturize my building was mostly because you could never get a very smooth rendered finished wall, and that used to really drive me crazy. So I thought, how do I disguise it? And that's why, just used to texturize my buildings with this coating called Tyrolean. So having tried to render with laterite and not necessarily feeling that it was going to be sustainable, I thought, how about me, trying to see if I can Tyrolean with that material. And, this is how we started this journey and started to experiment with it. And it was such a difficult thing, really, when we started because we were mixing it with a ratio that had a high consistency of cement. And cement was actually making the laterite very pale. So obviously we needed a binding agent in the mix, but the more we added, it really kind of like took it away from what it was naturally. And I was like, nah, this is not going to work. Let's try and almost take it out of the mix. We still managed to sort of like maintain a little bit of it in the final mix that we chose. But there's also another problem that we encountered when we were playing around with this or experimenting with this material, and that is we were working during the rainy season, and half the time when we do a wall, it will wash off. So we had to find a way of sealing this material. And from my days, working in London, knowing that you could use forgotten the name of this thing, but anyway, it's a PVA material, which is actually what they use in manufacturing paint. So that was what we ended up using to seal. I've used a few quotes by quite a few renowned architects about this whole notion of scarcity, but this was the project where we sort of like managed to at least sort of like capture the essence of what we were trying to do. It's a project called the Abidjan Mosque, which is in the southwestern part of Nigeria, Lagos. And we were asked, I think back in 2013, about building a mosque. And obviously at that time, I was still in just come back from the UK mode, so my building looked so much like it was foreign. Some people might argue that it still does now, but still. We were asked to do it, but over time, the client were saying that their financial resources was limited. So we had to sort of like do a number of iterations before we finally got onto this one. When we were asked to go ahead with this project, we were asked to do a bungalow structure, but I felt at the time that that wasn't going to be substantial enough for a community mosque, that I chose to say, I mentioned it to the client that I will increase the capacity of the mosque by adding another volume to it, and I'll do that at my own expense. And I think that sort of like was what started this whole journey in a way. I mean, another arm to the journey, basically. And that is, once I mentioned to them that I would use my own resources to do this, I think it kind of like gave me this artistic license to create this. Because at that time that I started working, I mean, the funny thing is that when we were about to come out of the ground, break ground, was when I decided to send the structural engineer some information that, listen, what we were going to build before is no longer the case. We're doing something different. And I think the whole experience of not being held back, because as all my friends here would tell you, in Nigeria, most times when a client engages an architect to carry out work on their, you know, what tends to happen is that you're more of like a tool. Clients tend to dictate exactly what it is that they want you to do. So you're just there following instructions. But with this, and it was for a community, or sorry, not a community, but for a group of people who were, you know, quite old, because the society was established back in 1932. So there were a lot of old folks in it, and you know, we are very respectful of our elders in Nigeria, but you know, I just chose to not listen to them anymore and do what I wanted to do. And you know, from me doing this and thinking about it, I think Abidjan Mosque exemplifies how contemporary design can be seamlessly integrated with traditional design principles to create a place of worship that not only meets the need of the present, but also pays homage to the past. I mean, this is where, you know, using the materiality so like starts to so like inform the architecture. This is obviously down to the fact that I'm the only one getting a time limit, or I'm so sorry. I hope I haven't bored you guys to death. Okay. So, I mean, the things that need to be spoken about, you know, it's like not just talking about the materiality, but also the essence of spatial, you know, the spatial experience, having to use in a space where we didn't want to use any type of mechanical, you know, air conditioning or anything like that, but just working with the principles of architecture with, you know, natural ventilation and passive or passive ventilation. God, I can't believe we did this. And this was something that, you know, we actually built during the COVID period. So, you know, we had challenges dealing with human resources then. You know, this picture obviously depicts the fact that from the laterite to the Tyrolean, and then some of this perforated wall was actually created with things that were found, you know, things that we had taken from other sites where we'd completed projects. So this being the project that led to what we ended up doing at Abidjan Mosque, we went back to it after a period of time. It's a what would I call it? It's a hub basically, and it was. We have this thing in Nigeria where everything comes in, but nothing goes out. We have all these containers that are like lining in our ports, and then this is how they move around the city. And, you know, it's such a big shame that we are so reliant on bringing things in, but unfortunately, because of our economy at the moment, things are like not coming in as much as they used to. However, that has left a big, so like, you know, or excess of containers, which we have now started to make use of in some of the projects that we're doing. So this is a project that was done in the University of Lagos, and it's a creative incubation, which is what I was trying to say earlier, meant to nurture raw ideas into products and products into industry. This is Bayo Omoboria, who is the client. But what's interesting about this is like from the lessons that we learned at the mosque, which is finding out the brilliance of the thermal insulation properties that laterite has, it now started to become a material that we were using to insulate the containers. As we all know, containers in those parts can be quite hot. So using the laterite to coat them internally and externally meant that we didn't need to sort of like rely on the importation of insulation, on plasterboard and things of that nature. This is like the full picture of that little girl looking back at us again, that, sort of like informed the architecture. This is a building that was meant to have been demolished in Lagos, in the next to the container project, but we thought rather than demolish it, we have excess cutouts of containers. How about we sort of like start using that to clad the building? And I think it was a good thing to do at the time, because it started to inform the young ones about what the possibilities are. These are, towards the latter stages of the project, which we've just recently handed over. More pictures. But it's just that, this journey of trying to sort of like discover a new way to represent our architecture, which is what we've now termed the new alternative Nigerian aesthetic, is how we're developing ourselves. And obviously there's a lot more that needs to be done, more research, more experimentation, and which is what we're doing. But what's more important is the fact that we've now managed to capture the attention of the young architects that are coming up, because they haven't really had anything to sort of like inspire them that is homegrown. So we're hoping, myself and all the other Nigerian architects that are here, that by virtue of being able to do things and taking ownership of our responsibilities, having them, because these guys all came to visit this building, to actually sort of like learn more about what we're doing and what we've done. And that has led to, and once again, I have to say a big thank you to my wonderful sister, Tosin, who had suggested to, just submit something for the Obel Foundation, Fellowship Foundation, because like, as I was saying about the young ones who we're trying to inspire, we have to have a platform where we can go in there and try and capture, try and start instilling and imbibing new ideas into the practice of how they're going to, or how they're going to be practicing architecture. So luckily, we submitted, and 2 of us were picked in Africa. I think it was a competition that had a spot for 1 person from Asia, 1 person from South America. But because of how strong our presentation was, they gave it to 2 African participants. So I am one of the lucky ones. So this is a platform that's obviously going to give me an opportunity to go and spread the gospel in the School of Architecture in Lagos. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Eddie. Can I ask the other participants to join me on the stage for a question and answer section? And then we will open the floor to the audience. Thank you, everyone. Those were fascinating presentations. My first question is for Yara and Nasser. Your initiative that you are bringing back, Architects and Designers for Gaza, deals with the now and the next in Gaza. Why is it important to already at this point be looking at rebuilding?
Why is it important to look now at the rebuilding?
Yes.
Well, because obviously it's an urgency. In the case of Gaza, we're not only looking at a status of uncertainty and temporality, but it's becoming an urgency because we're dealing with a context where the city itself becomes a refugee camp. So rebuilding is also about dignity, about empowerment, but also allowing people to start rethinking about it's a basic human right to have a right for a home and to have a right of a city. And what's special in Gaza is that when we talk about a context of home, it's not limited to the 4 walls of your house. The street and the neighborhood is an integral part. So that's why it's very crucial, given the 70% of the city is in ruins.
Yesterday, when we were talking, we ran into each other at the airport. You had mentioned that the urgency of making plans for rebuilding, even as this conflict is ongoing, is a question of urban rights. That, of course, we will immediately begin plans to rebuild. I wonder what the next action steps are for your group and your initiative.
Can I just add on to what Yara said earlier? Just going back, I think there is a kind of underlying agenda also about why we want to press with rebuilding right now. It's to do with the fact that there are so many political, if you like, unwritten, unspoken objectives about displacement of Gazayans. And we think it is very important right now, before those become formalized, before Palestinians or Gazayans are displaced and pushed into the so-called tent city, we need to take that initiative right now. So it is actually cementized that they have to rebuild their homes right now. So for us to go and claim and demand that we want to go there now to help them to rebuild, in a way, even stops the discussion whether the people of Gaza should go or should not go back. So that's quite important. Just going back to the second question, I think when we went to Gaza first, we realized that there were many NGOs, many organizations that were working in Gaza at the time. This is in 2010. And we formed what was called Gaza Green Coalition. And the purpose of that Gaza Green Coalition was to bring in different NGOs, different organizations who were working in fragments in different places. And we felt that it was important for a sustainable development, we should take a neighborhood and form an umbrella where, using the resources and the skills that was available, to form this Gaza Green Coalition and develop ideas that would be formalized and becomes more applicable by UN. And I think the Green Lab that we developed, which was emerged out of the discussion and necessity, the Green Lab, it was actually by UN, then UN and UNESCO developed and formalized as new typology, that any school that was being built in Gaza or rebuilt after the 2010 would include a lab, a laboratory, a green lab, which they did, but unfortunately they were bombed in 2014. But there we go, we're going to go back, we're not going to stop.
Along the lines of impact on community, Esther, I have a question for you, which is how you measure the impact on the community. I would love to hear more about the afterlife of the projects that you do.
Como você mede o impacto que tem na comunidade?
Okay. Great questions. I will answer in Portuguese, and she will translate it, okay? Nossos projetos, ele é muito importante porque, além do impacto que tem ali de imediato, ele possui um impacto contínuo, ou seja, nós capacitamos a comunidade para que eles continuem a transformação. E, além disso, nós também temos translated this part.
It has a big impact because it has a continuous impact in the way that the people are trained so that they can continue building and continue with this impact for the whole society.
E outro impacto, a maneira como nós medimos também o impacto é na saúde, no estudo, na saúde dos moradores, no estudo, como o estudo das crianças melhoram quando possuem uma casa mais digna, a conexão com o mercado de trabalho das mulheres. Então, a gente consegue medir quantas mulheres estão entrando no mercado de trabalho, quantas casas estão sendo melhoradas. Então, as famílias, elas não recebem apenas a estrutura de uma casa, mas elas também recebem conforto, dignidade, e isso impacta diretamente na saúde delas. E um outro exemplo é a da fazendinha. As fotos que eu mostrei aqui para vocês era de um lugar onde pessoas eram mortas, onde pessoas ficavam doentes, e agora não. Agora a fazendinha é um lugar que traz vida, um lugar de alegria.
So actually, the repercussions are quite big. First, to start with the health of the people, because it has improved a lot. Then there are places where the children can go to study, and there is a workforce of women that are being trained to work, and they are very happy with the results, that they can earn their own money. And also, many houses have been transformed so that people can live in dignity. And as Esther mentioned before about the project called Fazendinha, in the past, Fazendinha, little farm, they could have dead people living there, they would have sick people living there, but nowadays it's a place full of life where people can live with dignity, and they have all the resources that they need to live in a small place, but with dignity, with the toilet, with the kitchen, with all the necessities that the human life, the human life needs.
Thank you, Esther. Raafat Majzoub, his work also engages with community, has a lot of buy-in from the community. We prepared a question for him, which he pre-recorded. Raafat, in what ways has the current economic situation in Lebanon shaped your approach to urban space creation and other place-making initiatives?
Maybe it became, like the scarcity now has become in the foreground of a lot of projects that I'm working on, not just in Lebanon. It seems like academia is coming to academia, and also cultural work is coming to speed with the reality of the world, where people naturally have used the resources that they have to create abundance. And I honestly, also speaking from my perspective from a maker, I feel a little bit gimmicky when it becomes a prompt, but I just like to continuously acknowledge that this is something that I'm part of, that people have done naturally, and it's just, I feel also very grateful that we can be part of it and think about it as a contemporary part of our practice.
Adeyemo, I have a sort of speculative question for you, which is how you foresee modern Nigerian architecture evolving, particularly under scarcity, conditions of scarcity, climate change, and.
I think we're experiencing something that is now affecting everyone, in the sense that our currency has somewhat devalued, and this dependency of relying on imported material, I think, is now going to register across the board that we now need to start using things that we can source locally, and ideas that actually take us back to. I think what's interesting is when you look at the architectural landscape in Nigeria, you look at the type of, or the language that people like myself have met after going back. You know, we've had the pre-colonial architecture that is not very well documented, so there's nothing to go back to in that sense. And then we had the colonial, we had the post, or what I would call the tropical modern language, and then we now are living in a period where it's like a mixture of so many different things. So with the advent of, I think with the advent of people that are now developing this consciousness of what are the resources that we can play with. Because resources is not limited to just even the material, but to the ideas, like I said in my presentation. And I think what scarcity is going to force people to do is to, start thinking differently. There are a number of people that are like-minded here that are from Nigeria that already are beginning to show this new, what I would call this new trajectory of how Nigerian architecture needs to be represented. I always say to people that, when you look across the world, there's an architecture that speaks of its place. But how do we create that in Lagos, in this era? What are the things that we need to go back to? What are the things that are going to force a new alternative Nigerian aesthetic? I think we're all waking up to that fact. And I think scarcity, because with everything now being so easily connected by virtue of being with the internet, people are beginning to see that, oh, that's what these people are doing. I can do the same thing, or I was thinking of doing the same thing. So there's so many things that are beginning to drive this narrative that we're all on. But the consciousness of where we're from is what is also predominant now for people like myself and like I said, like-minded. Where are we from? What was our history? Let's respect the context. We can't just put a building that looks like it was meant to be in Dubai or Sharjah, in Lagos. Let's try and develop a mindset. And it needs to start with how the young architects or the young people or communities are also relating to the architecture. Because if they don't understand, how would they get what they need to be given? So they need to demand for it as well. And I think architects also need to, be a little bit more, I think everyone here has already touched on it, and that's how we can bring community into what we're doing. We always feel like we're the ones who have all the answers as architects, but really, it involves everyone, and it involves where we're practicing.
That's interesting. I guess my last question before we turn things over to the audience, I'd be curious, now that you've seen each other's presentations, and this is for all panelists, if you saw anything that provoked questions, if you have questions for each other, you saw anything in each other's presentations you found applicable to your own work.
I think the thing about it for me that has drawn me to each and every presentation that I've actually been very fortunate to see is this sense of unity and this critical mass building that comes with, trying to form or prefer solutions to major problems that actually have to do with the community. My presentation, as you can see, is actually not necessarily community-driven. The mosque that I built is a community project, yes, but still, in terms of how it actually was created, it was just me taking decisions by myself. But I guess, going back to the answer that I gave you earlier, which is to find a new meaning in how I represent the architecture. But what I would like to connect to each and everyone's presentation is this sense of community-driven projects that, tend to, I guess, tell a story that hopefully come up with answers that are absolutely necessary. And I'm hoping that my next step in this journey that I'm on is how to take pages out of the books of the Egyptian architect, where the architecture is not just for the individual or for just a limited number of people, but the whole community. And the questions that I would now ask, though, is from Ester, is, you obviously are the driver of what it is that you're doing. And I'm sure you have other people that are, forming this critical mass of trying to push this idea forward. How are you able to ensure that the essence of, you doing what you're doing now is actually going to be carried through to other people that are probably assisting you or people that are going to be inspired by what you're doing now?
Então, você é uma impulsadora. Como você pode ter a certeza que o projeto que você está fazendo, que essa essência do projeto, seja passado pelas outras pessoas?
Okay, great questions, thank you. Eu penso que a partir do momento em que a gente compartilha o conhecimento com um grupo específico de pessoas, esse conhecimento vai sendo replicado. As fazendeiras, por exemplo, elas, a partir do momento em que elas sabem como pintar, como colocar um azulejo, como reformar a sua casa, elas vão reformando outras casas, elas vão transformando a comunidade. Então, antes, a comunidade ela não tinha nenhum acesso ao conhecimento, às técnicas. E a partir do momento, agora que elas têm, elas mesmas vão reverberando esse conhecimento. É uma forma automática. E elas não só vão compartilhando o conhecimento, mas como elas também vão se conectando com outras oportunidades de trabalho. E pensando nessa expansão, as mulheres também elas vão atuando em outras favelas. A gente vai capacitando também em outras favelas. E isso vai crescendo. E a gente percebe esse crescimento pela quantidade de reformas que vão aumentando, pelas intervenções que a própria comunidade vai fazendo no seu território. Então, eles vão reformando as vielas, eles vão criando jardins. Então, a gente percebe, vai percebendo isso com o tempo, a médio e longo prazo, essa evolução da comunidade e na vida da pessoa a partir dessas primeiras técnicas que foram compartilhadas.
So, Esther thinks that this essence is very well kept because this causes a domino effect. The women have learned to do the work of the construction work, and now they feel able that they can do the construction, and they are very satisfied to put the bricks together, to make new rooms, to make a new community. And these teachings are passed to other communities, to other slums as well. So these shanty towns, they have the means to be developed and they can be constructed because the knowledge is passed from one community to the other community. And this creates a very good effect for these ladies that have a work to do and that pass the knowledge from one group to the next group.
Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to ask a question?
So we'll just take a couple of questions from the audience and then we'll have to wrap up. Yeah?
Okay.
I understand there's one here.
Hello, my name is Mpho from South Africa, and I really appreciated all of the presentations, especially the attention that each one gives to the question of survivance, of being resourceful, of working within given constraints, and the beauty of impermanence. And how this is an important ethic, not just for communities in the Global South, but an ethic for surviving what is actually a planetary catastrophe. But the question that I have has to do with the difference between spectacular violence and slow violence. And I was wondering if you could speak to how you're thinking about toxicity in recycling. So what does it mean to ask impoverished communities to live in materials or with materials that are compromised, that are contaminated, that are potentially poisonous? And what are the politics of this in terms of making long-term strategic changes in the built environment?
Shall I? Thank you for your questions. It's a very difficult question, by the way. Just to start with, I want to say thank you also for the presenters. It's been really very inspiring and touching, very much appreciated. In relation to your question, I think it's a very important question, but I think the context would be, the context and the timing are very important when we discuss interventions within context of scarcity, but also context where there are issues of war and contestation and ruination that takes place. I suppose nobody should be living within a context where there are a lot of toxics around. But there is an issue about also time. And there is an issue about what do we do in a context where temporality plays an important role. And how much do you allow the community to just facilitate for them conditions for them to build and develop and empower themselves. I think what is important, say, within our context, if I may say that, it is not the outcome or the final product as such. It's more about the process of creating conditions for the community to test, to experiment, to decide to discard something and add something to it. That said, it may be, and we've discussed this so many times, we discuss issues of vernacular, we discuss where is the cultural identity, we discuss where is the ethics of using a crushed concrete in a project. They are all problematic and important questions. Would we call one day a building built of crushed concrete that marks war or that marks toxic part of our vernacular heritage? Maybe yes, maybe not. It is a problem. But I think what's more important is to keep that sense of impermanence and allow for the building not to be a monumental mark that we want to celebrate. Rather, we celebrate the community and their decision. So I'd rather we facilitate rather than we leave marks on the ground. And that's why we call for what we call invisible architecture, where we're not obsessed with the final outcome, rather the process of building the community itself. It may sound a cliche, but within the context of Gaza, at the moment, the people need a roof over their head, and we need to work with what is available because, unfortunately, the international community have failed the people. And the international community have failed us, meaning we have to start to working from what we have on the ground, even if there are issues and problematic questions that we have to still deal with. So it's not an ideal scenario. Gaza would never heal as it should be, but maybe it is also a marker in time to tell us that the international community left this geography to degrade in such a context as it is. I hope I answered.
Can I just simply add very, very quick, very, very practical comment here that in all the interventions that we've made, all the work that we've made with the community, whether it's in Palestine or elsewhere, we really had to do a lot of technical research, very practical things. We cannot go and work with community if we don't know our subject. It's our ethical and professional responsibility to make sure that when we go there, the whole idea of the lab was created because we were not able to go and just test on somebody else's house. We could not go and say, well, let's make this, it might fail, or let's see how the water filtration works. We had to test it here, in London. We had to test bringing engineers, so a multidisciplinary team had to go to Gaza and the West Bank to make sure that what we do works first. We had to test it before we work with the community. It's absolutely crucial that whatever one does, as professionals, we have to test it, we have to make sure that it is safe, but also it addresses the very, very technical and scientific questions.
Thank you all for these wonderful and very moving presentations. I really much appreciated these different views on scarcity, scarcities of territory and expression and of means and of ideas. And I'm speaking to you as somebody who has actually lived in the region for many years, so my question actually has to do with this worldview, this view on scarcity in places where this type of urgency doesn't seem to exist. So my question is really, how would you strategize, how would you valorize this idea of using scarcity as a positive, as a design aspect, as an advantage for communities who don't feel this type of urgency, where these threats, environmental, political, social, seem to be distant.
Do you mean countries like in the global north, where these ideas are not necessarily relevant to those locations, or are you talking about areas where are having these challenges, but maybe it's not something that can, because when we look at your presentation, for example, it's like what I said to, and I'm so sorry, I'm kind of like, asking a question based on your question, and that is the idea of what's happening in Gaza right now, which is a problem that is a humanitarian problem, but it is still ongoing. So, but obviously, with the research, even though some of these things were done in years before now, but looking at what we found ourselves in, with what's actually happening in Gaza, how can these interventions be executed in order to address the major issue that we have there now? And it goes back to, is it like a resolution that can be done tomorrow? Or is it something that we're going to just talk about now, and hopefully it will get to where it's needed and then be executed? But I hope that kind of like addresses your question in a way, with me asking another question based on that. Questions for you, yeah. That how do you sort of like...
I've got a question.
Wait a minute. You can translate it for me, because I don't understand it. So you're okay?
Sim. Então, e aqui em sociedades que não têm essa urgência pela construção, por exemplo, na Palestina tem urgência de fazer isso na hora, mas em outras sociedades pode esperar. Qual é o caso do seu caso?
Okay. Great question too. Thank you. Infelizmente, nas favelas, as pessoas esperam por 20, 30, 40 anos. É um processo muito, muito, muito demorado. Elas não deveriam esperar tanto tempo para poder ter acesso ao saneamento básico, para poder ter acesso a uma moradia digna. É por isso que nós intervimos dentro desses territórios, porque o poder público ele demora demais para, de alguma forma, intervir. A intervenção ela deveria ser de forma imediata, mas isso não acontece. E é por isso que eu busco incentivar cada vez mais profissionais de arquitetura, organizações sociais, para estarem ali dentro das favelas, porque a espera é muito longa e não deveria ser assim, porque pessoas morrem, pessoas ficam doentes por conta da maneira como elas vivem, de espaços que prejudicam a saúde pública.
So in Brazil, and now we are talking about São Paulo specifically, there is a big urgency to get things done. But if they wait for it to happen from the side of the government, from the public sector, it will take 20, 30, 40 years. In the meantime, people are sick, they have passed away, and this is not a real solution. So that's why Ester is working with other organizations that can help them to sort out this problem and to work on it quickly so that they can sort out the problems of these people, that they can live in dignity, in real houses, with all the basic needs that the human being needs in order to flourish.
Thank you, everyone. That is all we're going to have time for today. Thank you all for participating and for joining us in this gathering.